Well, welcome back. I'm Mackenzie Warren, news executive at Gannett Company, here on location in Boston at the IRE Conference. That's investigative reporters and editors, here with a board member of IRE, Manny Garcia. Manny is the executive editor and general manager of El Nuevo Herald in Miami. And Manny's got a long a resume of awards, had a hand in directly in 3 Pulitzer Prizes and a couple other finalists. And in fact, El Nuevo Herald was the first Spanish-language publication to be a finalist for a Pulitzer Prize.
Yes, we are.
And something to be proud of there. And we'll talk about a few of those stories. But
Sure.
Manny, I plan to talk about 4 different things over the course of the next 15 minutes or so.
Okay.
The work that you and your team do, investigative journalism, the people, the journalists that you work with, and some of the things you look for and expect, and behaviors that you demonstrate yourself. I want to talk about some investigative reporting methods that you've mastered over time and that you passed down to some of your other journalists working with you. And then ultimately I want to talk about some results and some of those prize-winning stories that more importantly got great results for people in South Florida. So I want to first start talking about, before you were a journalist, you sold shampoo.
Yeah.
And you were an EMT.
Yeah, I've had a varied career before journalism, which actually, looking back now, it was the best thing that I could have done. And I actually use that in recruiting. I want to look for candidates or individuals who've had life experience outside the realm of journalism. Yeah, I was a truck driver, an emergency medical technician, and I was a beauty supply salesman.
Oh, all right.
And I sold shampoo, hair color. I could tell you everything you need to know about that. And I actually, I did it pretty well, considering I have no hair, but go figure, it worked out. And it actually, and I use this example that being a journalist and being a salesman, it's the same thing. You've got to persuade someone to buy a bottle of hair color, or you got to persuade someone to talk to you or give you a document. So it's all about, it's what I call, it's the schmooze factor. You got to be able to schmooze. This is a business that's built on relationships. Yeah. And being able to communicate, and you got to have a personality.
And in a few minutes, we're going to talk about your methods, and the Father Manny persona, too, I think is related to the schmooze factor. But after driving trucks and being an EMT and selling beauty supplies, you came to doing God's work.
Yep.
Tell me about what you mean there.
It's absolutely, I consider this to be, it's like doing God's work. Some folks become rabbis, priests, other folks go on mission trips overseas, and I view this as a calling. This is no different than being a doctor or a nurse. It is an absolute calling, because I can't think of any other profession that you can affect change so profoundly. And you see it whether it's at IRE or the work Gannett does or McClatchy or the other companies out there. Our ability to affect change, whether it's fix flaws in jetliners, get people released from prison, change laws, save lives.
Root out corrupt elections.
Root out, of course, exactly. Get rid of corrupt politicians, overturn crooked elections like we did. It's for me, it's doing God's work. I really view it that way.
It's interesting to hear you talk in those terms, and I happen to have dug out a copy of the good book here.
There you go.
And so I wondered if you would be willing to turn to the Gospel of Luke.
That's right.
That's
right.
In the 12th chapter, there's a verse that I know you're fond of. Would you read that, please?
Yeah, it's the well, I'll tell you, it is absolutely Luke 12, verse 2 and 3, and it says, "Whatever is done in the darkness will come out in the light. Whatever is whispered in closets will be shouted from the rooftops."
Okay.
So that's and what it is. And that's exactly what the verse means, which is, and that's what journalists does. Whatever is whispered in closets, whatever people do behind closed doors, or companies do behind closed doors, or politicians or public officials, we shout from the rooftops.
Yeah.
In our essence, shouting from the rooftops for us is our newspapers, our websites, our social media. We get the word out there. It's shining a light on darkness.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if the King James version of the scripture reads quite like that, but you've captured the essence.
Yeah, this is exactly.
That's
In
right.
fact, I've got a little Gideon upstairs too, a little small one.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you've mentioned too that you think that there's never been a better or more important time to be an investigative journalist and to do God's work like you're talking about. What makes you say that?
Because the impact now that you have is extraordinary. When I started in the business, you'd write a story, and it would come out in a newspaper. Maybe the wires would pick it up and send it out there, and it could be a couple of days before you got a response, unless the local TV station picked up the story. But now you have the immediacy of the internet. When you put your story on the website and it goes around the world, you tweet it with a link to the story, or you put it on Facebook. So now you have this, using the amazing realm of social media.
Yeah.
And it's just the impact. I'll tell you a quick example. When the space shuttle blew up years ago, I was sitting in a restaurant in Louisiana. I filed a story for the web saying, this is what happened with the shuttle, and within minutes, I got an email to my email address saying, oh, you want to go talk to this engineer in Mississippi who has a much better idea of exactly what happened.
Really interesting.
And next thing, and this happened, I kid you not, within 15 minutes of our story going on the website, I was in my car out of the restaurant heading to Mississippi.
Yeah, well, that's a great example of things that I think are starting to happen more and more. You're also the general manager in addition to being the executive editor, so you have a business responsibility as well. And one of the things that you've said that I think journalists can take heart in is that advertisers want to be around credible, watchdog, investigative, accountability journalism.
Without a doubt. I mean, an advertiser wants to be with a credible product. They absolutely want to be involved with organizations that are doing value-added, important work. And we've seen it every time we have a big investigative project. In fact, even here at IRE, I was talking to a couple of editors, and they hear from their own publishers and their advertising VPs that, oh, I want to be in this newspaper. I want to have an ad in there because I know this is a credible news organization. Investigative reporting is good business. It's good business because it moves traffic on the website, it sells newspaper, it creates an incredible goodwill in the community, which is an intangible. You can't put a price on that. And an advertiser, when they're looking where to put their money, they want to be with a credible news organization.
Yeah.
And what better way than through watchdog journalism?
That's great. So earlier you mentioned that when you're recruiting, you're looking for people with life experience beyond just journalism. And one phrase that you turned me on to is you're looking for citizens of the world.
Yep.
Say more about who meets that description.
Sure, citizens of the world. I use that when I speak to college students because now the world has gotten so small, again, through the advent of social media and Facebook, but now you have to have a varied amount of skills. And of course, you need to be a good writer. You need to be, I look for students who are learned. Do you follow things going on in the world, events? Language is so important to be able to speak more than one language. In my case, I speak Spanish, but we look for folks who speak Spanish. Portuguese is really in demand. French.
I'm sure French and Creole in South Florida
Absolutely.
are essential.
Yeah. And so what I look at, and then folks who have a well-rounded view, I'm looking for students who have an understanding of business knowledge, international relations, because, for example, look at South Florida where I work. South Florida, it's the gateway to Latin America, but it's also the gateway now to the world. You have a huge influx of merchandise and businesses who are investing in South Florida from the Far East. So that's what I mean. It's just, I tell students, you need to be a citizen of the world. Learn what's going on.
Right.
Learn what's going on, because you could be working in Miami one day and then you could be in Hong Kong in the next.
Sure. Now let's talk about methods. You're the top editor of El Nuevo Herald, but at the root of it, you're a reporter.
Without a doubt.
Who's Father Manny when you're reporting? And does Father Manny make any appearances as an editor these days?
No, Father Manny tries to pass down his tips to the next generation of investigative reporters now. The name came up years ago because, again, I think the Father Manny persona really comes from the ability listen. A key thing that I look for in reporters is listening and empathy. Really good investigative reporters, they have a righteous indignation in the sense that they want to make sure they do the project right, but they also listen well, and they're empathetic to people. The Father Manny came is because I've been able to get I've persuaded people to confess to me that they've, committed crimes, that they've stolen, that they've, stolen from the public trough, that they've been sleeping with people,
paying out bribes or taking
paying out bribes, sleeping with their husband's criminal defense lawyer, sleeping with somebody to close their code enforcement case,
Oh
and
my
they've
gosh.
all been on the record, and so. But
Now, when you're reporting people's misdeeds and shining a light where it needs to be,
Yeah.
going back to the Luke
yeah,
verse,
sure.
is I know that you bend over backwards to be fair.
Oh yeah.
And you've told me some stories in the past about people who you've busted coming
Sure.
back after doing time
Yep.
and thanking you or saying you were right, and or you've also told stories about how, when the story hits the website or hits the front doorstep after you've been reporting it, you're calling them saying,
Sure.
let me hear what you think. So talk about that level of effort there in pursuit of fairness and why you do that.
Yeah, it's as important, Mackenzie, as just the labor that goes into the project. You need to put as much emphasis as, making sure you're fair. If a person's stealing or committing a crime, they're still doing it. But from my standpoint, no one that we've ever done an investigative project on has been sandbagged. They all know what's coming. He or she, I give them ample notice. What I do is usually I'll send them a set of questions, or I'll call them, or I'll sit down with them and saying, this is what I'm going to say. This is what I'm going to do. Another thing now, as all our newspapers are doing more with databases, as we do data analysis, we actually send our complete data file and our analysis to the agency who we're investigating, saying, here's your database, scrub it, say what's wrong with it, so we can either corroborate it or change what we have to do. But the point is that we want to make sure we give everyone a fair shot. Back to your question, every time a story landed on the website or the paper of somebody I was writing about, I would call them the next morning early, and I knew oftentimes they would be pissed. Sometimes it didn't work, they'd scream at me, or sometimes they wouldn't pick up the phone, but in most cases, those individuals picked up the phone and talked to me, because from my standpoint, I don't believe in hitting and running. No one should ever walk into the doorstep and pick up a paper or log on a computer and feel like they've been sandbagged. Oh. And also, treat someone with empathy. If somebody's got a response to whatever you're writing about, put it high up in the story. Our policy has been to put it before the jump. And like I say, I always give them.
Interesting.
I always give them their side. If they're flat out lying, because we have people lying to us, and I'm not going to give them the whole response up there, because at the end of the day, they're lying to you. But if you treat people with dignity and respect, they will appreciate it. And so it's a little long, but yes, we have sent people to prison, and what they've done, in fact, one police chief in particular, before he went to prison, he called me and he says, I was wrong, you were right, my apologies. We've helped send individuals to prison who call us, who got out of prison. In fact, I've written to some of them in prison, how you doing? How's your family?
That's Father Manny coming out.
Father Manny, and then, thank you for doing it. You were the only one who cared. All my friends disappeared. So, when they come back into society, some of them have come back and, they've paid their dues. And one of them is a big political consultant, and he was one of our biggest tipsters. Another one's a former city manager in the city of Miami, and he provides tips for us all the time.
Sure.
And so they went from their bad position to now helping us, but they felt they got what I believe a fair shot.
That's great. The Miami Herald, where you've spent many years, is highly decorated, many Pulitzer Prizes. El Nuevo Herald hasn't had as long of a history as the Miami Herald, and in some ways could be said to be in the shadow of the Miami Herald. But you talk about punching above your weight.
Yeah.
And maybe that has to do with the Miami Herald and its great tradition. Maybe it has to do with other competitors, or the enormity of all the great stories in Florida, South Florida. But what is punching above your weight in your mind?
For me, is being confident, having trust in yourself and your news organization, whether you're talking about El Nuevo Herald or whether you're in Fort Myers, your former paper. It's about having the confidence that you can compete with anybody as a journalist. And in fact, when I went to El Nuevo Herald, I spent 18 years at the Miami Herald. When I went to El Nuevo Herald, a lot of friends told me, says, man, you are crazy. You're giving up the #2 job of as managing editor to go to El Nuevo Herald. I says, yes, I am, because I can lead a newsroom, I can be an executive editor. And so what is, in fact, our nickname for El Nuevo Herald is a Ferrari. In fact, we call it the Ferrari because we're fast, we're confident, and we're innovative. I mean, we're just confident. We turn on a dime, we rip up the paper, we experiment like Ferrari does with their vehicles. And that's what I tell our folks. We can go head to head with anybody on any story, and so don't be afraid. It's like a fighter. You want to punch above your fighting weight. Do not back down from anybody on any story.
Yeah, and the biggest and most traditional of competitors might be more compared to a Buick or something like that. So you have so many advantages if your analogy with the Ferrari holds up.
Absolutely.
Well, we don't have time to tell every story that you've done great. Just to remind readers, you were the lead reporter on the Elian Gonzalez story, that iconic young man of Cuban origin who was the FBI raided the house, and
the feds, they took him back to send him back to Cuba.
Flashpoint with immigration and the special aspects of the Cuban American immigration policy. You've gotten people out of jail, like a guy who was in for rape and murder, who had the mind of an 8-year-old and was innocent, and your work and that of your colleagues got him set free. You rooted out in a huge election scam in 1999 that caused the election results in Miami to be overturned, and a whole massive restructuring of how elections were delivered in South Florida. The one story, though, that we have time to talk about that is actually quite recent stems from the Haiti earthquake and some human trafficking and so on that you and your colleagues got to. So tell that story, if you would, briefly.
Yeah, this is, again, it's about listening to the reporters and being aware of what's going on. After the earthquake, one of our El Nuevo reporters, Gerardo, came to me and says, I hear there's children being trafficked out of Haiti to the Dominican Republic. Imagine this tragedy where parents, their livelihood's been destroyed, and they hear there's an opportunity for their children to be able to be educated and have safe housing and food.
When they don't know if they will be able to provide for them past tomorrow.
Of course not. That's exactly right. And then Jackie Charles from the Miami Herald was hearing the same thing. So I told Gerardo, listen, let's just go overseas. Again, being a Ferrari, playing above your fighting weight. I sent Gerardo, just like the Herald, the New York Times, CNN would do, go to Haiti. And we did a multi-platform series, again, because we're a modern news organization, print, video. And what we found was we were able to document, we saw for ourselves children being carried across the border from Haiti to the Dominican Republic by smugglers. A lot of these children, especially girls, ended up in tourist towns where they were forced into prostitution or slavery, making pittances. And so we sent a videographer. We basically followed the path of children. We followed the coyotes as they were taking the children across the border to safe houses, to these tourist towns. And it culminated with our reporter and videographer in the tourist towns actually videotaping tourists picking up young girls. And the police was ignoring this. And so it became a big series for us that had impact because the Dominican Republic cracked down on the trafficking of children. So we helped save the lives of these children.
And to bring things full circle, I think that that scripture reading from before is all about that exact moment.
This was all being done in the cover of darkness, shadowy folks carrying children into these safe houses where they would sit until nightfall and then put them on the back of motorcycles. So it's right out of Luke 12:2-3. What's done in the darkness will come out in the light, and we did it.
Yeah. Well, Manny, you're an inspiration. You've done great work, and you keep doing great work. Keep on being a Ferrari. And I want to thank you for just sitting down for 15 or 20 minutes and telling a little bit of your story. For those who haven't met you, they need to. So that's Manny Garcia of El Nuevo Herald.
Thank you.